Welcome everyone to DRJ's webinar series. I'm Bob Arnold, President of DRJ. We thank you for joining us today and we hope you gather some great information from today's webinar. Everyone's phone has been muted and we ask you to utilize the question panel found on the right-hand side of your screen. Our speaker today will attempt to answer as many of these as possible at the end of today's session. Today's sponsor is Strategic BCP and today's topic is a success story. The lizard brain. Our speaker today is Chris Duffy. Chris is the Vice President of Professional Services at nCino for Strategic BCP. He has over 25 years of experience in the IT, disaster recovery, and risk management areas. He is a highly sought industry expert and speaker, underscoring ingenuity and common sense professional approach to customer needs. Before we get started here today, we'd like to open it up with a quick poll, though. So let me open this up. And you'll see our question here we would like to start with today is, what is the size of your typical plan? Is it 0 to 50 pages, 50 to 100 pages, 100 plus pages, or you don't have a plan? So we'll just give everyone a quick second or so here to answer that quick question. And welcome, Chris.
Well, thank you very much, Bob. I really appreciate it. So welcome to the Lizard Brain and Business Continuity. First question I usually get asked is, what's a CINO? That's the Chief Innovation Officer, and probably one of the best jobs I've ever had. I get to go around and get feedback from customers, put that into user stories, and then bring it back to my product development team. So what you're probably wondering is, okay, lizard brain, biology, how does that relate to business continuity, disaster recovery? And this really all started, I was a speaker at a conference for higher education, and there was a futurist who was the keynote speaker there, and he had a great presentation, but one of the things I walked away with during that presentation was he was starting to talk about knowledge and intelligence, and the piece that he was really getting for was talking about the news. And when you watch the news, there's 10 bad stories for every good story. And those bad stories instill fear. And fear immediately kicks in some instincts, which adrenaline kicks in, and it's fight or flee is one of our basic instincts, and we stop thinking. So his bottom line on this was basically that watching the news makes you stupid. And I took that and I said, wow, that really has some impact. And as I spend more and more time working, is in the event of a disaster and living through those disasters, your brain does shut down. And a little bit more research took me to Seth Godin. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but I'll let you know, if you take a look at here, he calls it, and it's referred out there to the lizard brain, and he's referring it to growth in the person. And until you deal with that resistance, you'll stay frustrated because you stop thinking. And I started taking some liberties of saying, wow, kicking in that adrenaline, wow, that's what we do, right? But, so I can't promise you an adrenaline rush while we're doing this, but I definitely will promise you that, hopefully you won't be like this during the presentation. So let's look at that function. So if we take a look section of the cross section of the human brain, is what's it broken down to? And we'll take a peek at each one of these. So the first one is called the neocortex, or the outer part of the brain. And what we're going to see there is real important. This is the human brain. It's that rational thinking, right? It's having emotions, morality, and creativity. And when you think about that, and you think about that in a professional sense, you might actually think of somebody who doesn't have a neocortex. Next layer down is going to be called the mammalian brain, or the limbic. And that's where we're going to see things, from an animal's perspective, is socialization, that maternal love. Those are the feelings that are basic to animals. Now, as we delve a little deeper, I like to use an expression from it. I don't know if you know who this is. This is Carl Sagan, and his favorite expression, he used to be a solar system presenter on TV. It was billions and billions of years ago. Well, billions and billions of years ago, we had the lizard or the dinosaur brain. And that's at the very core for the theory of evolution. We've all evolved from this. And, you know, I'm sticking with lizard because I've worked with enough dinosaurs in my time that we'll just stay with the lizard brain. And in that lizard brain, it's the basic instincts. And if we take a look at what those are and how they're going to relate, well, first is hunger. It's thirst, right? It's that the survivability of sustainability and reproduction. Basic core. Another basic core is territorial. Is that ability to protect what's ours. And last and most important is going to be that fight or flee instinct, which leads to watching the news. Now you may be wondering, okay, I get it, lizard brain, but why are you relating it to it? And this is real important, is that instinct, it moves through your brain 500 times faster than the speed of thought. So that means before you even built a thought around something or what you're going to do, you felt it, and emotions win. And in that confusion, we get caught. What? Between perception, what do we see versus reality? Now for us mammalians or humans, you know, that may be pretty clear or muddled depending on what the situation is. For you know, salmon swimming upstream, it's pretty clear. You know, one instinct takes over every other. But for us, the one instinct that takes over is that fight or flee. Now that fight or flee comes into play in a real world scenario. Is I've got a disaster. How am I going to deal with that? And how do we relate this back to building plans that are going to be not only resilient, that we can actually give the department the ability to recover, but also meet compliance. So we took a quick look at the evolution or the de-evolution of the human brain and how it works. Let's relate it back to business continuity. So when we look at the evolution of plans, there's multiple types, and I'll go through each one. So you've got compliance, those regulatory ones, handbooks, something was referred to as the GOMS, and then finally I'll touch base on and we'll dissect the lizard brain. So from a compliance standpoint, right? Everybody, you guys are probably just shaking your head now going, oh my gosh, what do they got in them? Well, I'm usually in a highly regulated industry, nuclear energy, you know, insurance, healthcare, financial. And those plans are huge. Those are what the external regulators and the auditors are going to want to see. And you can see that there's quite a bit to them. They're really thick, hundreds of pages. And who are they for? What's that audience? That's, again, it's usually going to be those external auditors, even regulators, or internal audit, and depending on the situation. So when we look at that, that's pretty much what we're going to see for a compliance plan. Next is going to be the handbook. So the handbook, and you notice it's usually a step down, right? It's not going to be that full giant plan. It's going to be at a more of a departmental level with a lot of overlay on policies, procedures, crisis management, incident management, but it'll have everything else that's in there. And I find these to be the most common. And so here's how this relates to it. I was hired to do a consulting engagement with my team right here. I'm outside of Philadelphia. So we're downtown Philadelphia, and we have the meeting in the boardroom. And we go down, and the facilities manager or director is in charge of business continuity and DR. So he takes us down to his office, and he's down in the basement next to the boiler room. And we start talking about it, and I'm like, well, can you give us your plans? And this is his bookcase behind him. So we're talking about it, and he goes, yeah, sure, not a problem. And he's very proud of them. And he turns around to this bookcase, and he goes, yeah, they are, and he's looking, he goes, oh yeah, it's right here. So the entire organization has one book, and that plan is stored here for their handbook. Needless to say, it doesn't sit there anymore, and it doesn't look like that. So the next set of plans in the evolution or de-evolution, depending on what you look at it, is called the GOMS. So it starts out pretty innocently. It's either a compliance or a handbook. And I'm sure you guys have experienced it. This is where the department owns the plan. And I'm responsible as the planner to make sure the department updates the plan. So it gets handed off within that department to hand it. Yeah, we need it for the auditors. They're coming in a week or 2 weeks. We need to get it done. But what happens is, even within the department, as people change and roll over, it goes as a task to get done on there. And that changes it to become lost in translation. It becomes the get off my back. It's where the department then fills in a paragraph without really reading anything previous or that and says, yeah, I've updated my plans. And for those of you that are not aware, this is from the Office Space movie. So where it does, it takes us to a crossroads. We've looked at, you've got a lot of plan types that are out there. There's a lot of reluctance, most part on the part of the departments, to get that work done. So that GOM plan really becomes prevalent. But when we look at it, where does it tie back to that lizard brain? And let's take a look at what that lizard brain plan looks like. Because remember, the first thing that happens is when we go to institute it, it's going to be during a disaster. And the first time we know of a disaster that's in here, if you think back to a large scale one, where's the first place we turn? Back to the news. And we already know what the news is going to do to the already stressful situation. So when you look at that stressful situation, what am I thinking about? Right? First things that go through my mind from personal experience and feedback is I'm thinking about me, my family, and my safety and what I'm going to do tonight. I am not thinking about at all my plans or what I'm going to do. So what we want to do is take that lizard brain approach to plans. What are our goals and some assumptions that we need to make before we build or use those plans? One, they're actionable, high level, that enable them to be successful. They're resilient. When you think about it, a disaster, I've got ADD, I've got all those things that are going through there. My goal here is to make sure that that function, that application, that infrastructure can be recovered and done that way. One of the other things in the plan you have to need to assume is that it's written for an SME, by an SME. Too often I'll see a recovery plan that's about 160 pages because it lists screenshots of what to do. How effective is a 146-page document going to be once I download it or get it or grab it in a disaster with those bells going off? So we really want to keep it at high-level steps. And the overall reminder, again, think instinct. Because what we really want to do is build reminders for those subject matter experts within the departments, not a how-to manual, which is all too common in plans. So when it comes to reminders, a little story here. My wife and I are foster parents for American Brittany Rescue. And if you know anything about Brittany's, they are extremely intelligent. They'll open doors. If they're not supervised, they'll figure out something, and they're natural hunters. So what we've done is we have training collars for them. And what that is that's a reminder for them. They're so focused on getting that dove that's sitting out on the porch or across the street, is the collar, you hit a button, it sends a reminder to them, like a tap on the shoulder to stay focused. Well, we don't use them for our kids, but or our coworkers. But the point is we want to build plans that are reminders. Because again, when you get into a 146-page document, where does the ball start? Where do I end? What am I doing in the middle? What occurs is analysis paralysis. Instead, too often than not, the plan gets ignored. And instead, I'm going to rely on my instinct, right? What I've done in the past or what I think to do, that plan became the mere suggestion that gets put aside. So let's focus on that lizard brain. I call it the 5x5 rule, right? First thing we want to do, though, is we're going to identify those resources we needed for a process. But here's the first rule of 5. Almost every department, now I've worked with over 300 clients and engagements, and we tell them every department has between 1 and 5 high-level processes. And believe it or not, the majority will fit into that, especially if you set that as a guideline. Again, high level. And then once you need to diagram or dissect those processes out, almost everyone is into 5 high-level steps for both operating and recovery processes. Again, it's easy to follow 5 steps. So remember, the human brain can remember, what, 7? Short-term memory. So this works out really well. So if I take let's take it and dissect this, and we'll go through this. So I'll take the first 5 and the second 5. We've got a couple exceptions, but let's build the plan. So the first step, first rule of 5. So I decided, okay, let's take that department and those 5 high-level functions. Now, the biggest challenge here is identifying a definition of a department, depending on your size organization. You know, if you're in a Fortune 10, your finance department is made up of multiples. So we usually say use a guideline as it's a management level. I have a management that has a subject matter expert. So in this case, I've taken a smaller organization in finance and said, hey, what do you do? So you can see here, I got my payables, my receivables, my ledger, payroll, and taxes. So again, 5 high level. If it's 6, that's fine. Some departments are 1 or 2, and that's fine too. But that's why we always say on average. So the first thing we want to do is identify functions. Now, you know, part of that process is, yes, you want to look at your interdependencies, your inflows and your outflows, you know, as part of the ISO standards. But again, this is the core. What are your 5 high-level processes? So let's take one of these processes and follow through that. So from an accounts payable position, we'll follow the second rule of 5. We'll break it down and put it back together. So from accounts payable, what do we do? And again, this comes out from the departments. Well, within so many days, we get notifications. We're going to make sure that the money's there and that the vendor's good. Once that's done, we'll issue it regarding the contract. I'll send out the payment. I update the general ledger, close that out. Great. So again, 5 by 5, 5 steps, 5 processes. Now there is always exceptions to rules. Some departments will have more than that, but for, you know, the one we see, the biggest one is in IT, right? So if you're looking at whether it be application or infrastructure, it's going to be about on average 7 steps. And so here's I'll use the word templated approach to it, and then I'll talk through it. So hey, you got to get notified. Something's got to start. How do I get that notification or validate that? I'm going to fix it. I'm going to do my restoration, test it, do internal and external validation with my stakeholders, and then close the ticket. Now I can attach the details that I need for that application or that infrastructure. But again, here's the 5 or 7 high-level steps. And we see this holds true across most IT. And again, remember, it's written for the subject matter expert. So just a quick review is, so the lizard brain, that high level actionable, 5 by 5 rule, 5 processes, 5 steps. As I diagram them out, the next piece that we want to do is assemble them. And usually with an assemble, we like to use an analogy. Is, okay, so bill of materials, core resources required is, since you're doing it, what do you need to do? I want to make it easy to update for the department. So if I list all my ingredients, support components together as one, and they have to go update it, they go to one spot to update. And what we also recommend here is genericize the ingredients. I don't care, or they don't care, that it's a Dell Latitude SP2200 or an HP Pavilion. It's a desktop. It's a laptop. That makes it nicer in updating plans so that I don't have to go back and change my model of laptop or my multifunction printer because we've changed vendors. It doesn't change that. Here's another psychological point to this. Remember, I got a lot of things going on. My head is not in work. So giving me that focus list is going to be real important. Another piece is the ability to take a breath. And where do I want to take a breath is if I get my stuff together and I know it, okay, I got it, what I need to do. Because what's that doing? It's creating that success for them up front is, okay, it's a small victory, but it gets me what I need. It also keeps me focused. What we do with customers is, I'll say is, okay, you made coffee this morning. What did you do? Right? Well, I can do it innately. I've been doing it for so long, but I get my filter, my coffee, my water, and my pot. Okay, well, those are my list ingredients. So before I start working, I do that, and we take that approach here. So let me take it and show you how that's going to look internally. So let's just stay with that accounts payable, is that ingredients. So there's my plan and my steps. Now, one of the rules is, when you're doing this, whether it be in Excel or you have an application or software package or a whiteboard or, however you're doing it, one of the things is if you ask it, don't duplicate it. So if I said, what software do you use for notification? And you tell me, I'm going to write that down and I no longer need to repeat it. So at the next step, so if you take it step by step by step and ask at each step, what do you need for this, right? What do you need for step 2? What software applications do you need for 3, for 4, or for 5? And list it out. They're now thinking at that process. You'll build the ingredient list together separately, and one of the style things that we do is we'll do this with a whiteboard because it's a lot faster, and we use colors for the different categories. It's a visualization, and the nice thing about the whiteboard, it engages the department into it. So if you pick up a wrong color, they'll tell you. So who are the people or roles that we need to do the notification validation? Oh, the manager updates the GL. Let me get that in here. Neat point about this is this organic way of doing it the first time is if you give me a list to pick from the first time, I'm going to do it automatically. But if we have a conversation, you're going to discover, as the professional here, things that are uncovered. For example, rogue applications that aren't there, or rogue vendors that have been that they're in use that have bypassed process. It'll come out in the wash. It comes out here. So that's a real nice benefit to doing this. And these are just some examples. So here's that genericized office productivity category. Yeah, well, he uses a laptop. We use desktops. We have a Copyfax print device. We use our phones, and we also have a company-owned cell phone. One of the nice things about Lizard Brain you want to focus on as well is, wait a second. If common rule will say is if you can buy it at Staples, there's no need to categorize it because it's going to be easily available. But instead, let's go after that specialized equipment, stuff that I can't get at my fingertips. So in this case, we're issuing checks. We have an embosser, we have the electronic ink, and a very specialized check printer, let's say. We want to capture that as well. And then lastly, I'm sending payments. How do we do that? Oh, email and the post office. Great. Put them down. That's what we want to do. So now let's take all of this. Let's take that 5x5 rule, 5 steps, five processes, and this list, and let's put them into what a sample plan would look like and dissect it. So first and foremost in a sample plan, okay, who am I? Right. Here's the head of my department, the owner who builds the plans. It could be the department managers, doesn't matter. Some description of what we're doing, right? This is a department where I'm located. In this case, I know I've got 11 employees, but in a recovery situation, in a 30-day window, I'm only going to need 3. From there, what's the first thing I need to know? Prioritization. Show me my BIA. What's my description and what's my RTO or time frames? And you can see here and color code them, right? Critical's red. Necessaries, orange. Payroll, or payroll in this case is optional because it's automated, is green. So keep a nice colors, and let colors help as well, especially in a disaster. So let's keep dissecting this plan to take a look at what we've got. So here's what we've taken into an Excel or a software program to do it. So the first thing we see, okay, at the top is it's accounts payable, my location. I can see it's critical. B or blue for normal operations. So everything on the left is in blue. That's what we do normally. Now I get to see it. I need that. Red, recovery. What do I need in the event of recovery? And again, this is where you want to set some guidelines as well. For example, we can't come to the facility as a baseline, and all but our active applications are down. So what do we need to do normally? And then what do I have from that recovery standpoint? So I get to see that. And again, 5 steps. I'm following one high-level page for that, to do that. Now, in a lizard brain plan, remember, we want to address the instinct as well. So the first thing you always recommend that we put in there, besides, again, the steps, is going to be some images, some documents that are going to help them. In this case, in a sample plan, right? How do we get out of this floor? How do we get out of the building, and where do we meet? So when you think about disasters or where you're going to actually declare or use your plans, fire, right? Any one of the ones that affects the building. And the first thing that happens to first responders is they're going to want to count and check a floor plan of the office. And for employees is getting a count of everybody before we can go in, make sure everything's clear. This can take hours. People don't realize how long it takes if that fire alarm gets pulled and it's not a false alarm, how long it's going to take to get back into that building. I got to do that accounting. That's really important. So where this all ties together is the benefits to a plan. Yeah, we want to make it agile, easy to manage. You remember the GOM, right? If I've got this and it's simple, I'm going to be more apt to put time into it than just throw a paragraph into it and just say, I've done it. And one of the things that we found throughout any engagement is they appreciate the approach. It's being respectful of their time. It's an agile methodology to working with those departments and building plans and doing that. From an organizational standpoint, from the enterprise, they are truly actionable. You can use those for a test. You think about how many tests are scripted, especially from an IT perspective. In the DR, you're running a script and you're sitting there unprepared. But in a true disaster, I don't have that ability. So having that plan that works at a high level keeps me focused is going to be done. And important, it creates success. So when we talk about the name lizard brain, it's a fun visualization, right? If you say, hey, where's your lizard brain plan at? I remember just recently I was out at a client that I haven't seen in about 2 years. And I'm meeting with the Chief Information Security Officer in his office. And like today's most offices, there's big glass panels, and people are walking by because he's got a nice view out the front. And it was a knock on the glass, and the woman was the head of finance, so she knocks because she was looking in, and he invites her in, and she says hello to me. She had something to say to him, and she said, "Oh, by the way, Chris, you ought to see my lizard brain plan. We've really tweaked it." So this is 2 years later, and that term has stuck with her, and it was a positive in that respect. So again, the analogy I use with our sponsors or our planners is life insurance. They don't call it death insurance for a reason. They call it life insurance. It has a positive spin. So having a lizard brain plan really helps. So in closing, I want to bring this all together because one of the challenges or questions is how, you can see how we can make an actionable, resilient, easy to manage plan, but the big piece is compliance. Is where does compliance fit into a lizard brain plan? Because if I gave this to the OCC or the Federal Reserve, they'd laugh at me. So the analogy I'd like to use here is the Earth. Right? So here's a nice cross section. You didn't think you'd get a geology lesson on top of a biology lesson. So when we look at the lizard brain, right, that's got my processes. Show me what's important and my time frames. Show me what I do normally and recovery. Put that list of ingredients or resources together. Put what I need in from an evacuation standpoint, because that's where I'm going to use it the most. And then optionally is, I could even have my vendor contacts in there. So now let's go backwards through those. So what we've done is eliminate the GOMB plan, because there's no more get off my back. It's lizard brain. Next step up is going to be handbook. And that handbook, it's going to be show me my call list. If I have emergency mass notification or a call list that's internal to the department, put it in there. Here's where I put the SME reminder detail to department documents. On recovery, here's the failover, maybe an illustration for the call center on who gets what and where. And then again, any illustrations or diagrams. So it's a beefier plan. So we've gone from maybe 10 pages to 20 or 25 pages. So that's a little deeper into the, deeper outside of the core. We're just wrapping around, that's the term I'll use, is we're wrapping around the lizard brain or the core. Next is going to be our compliance. So now at the core is still going to be the departmental recovery plan or the lizard brain. And then handbook wraps around that. But what we see is your compliance is going to wrap around that. It's going to be all of our policies, crisis management, pandemic, alternate work location, policies. Going to have a table of contents, appendices, even more detail on the procedures for crisis management, and then glossary, those definitions. So the nice thing is when you look at this as a holistic model, the departments are focused here and a little bit here. Human resources, internal audit, risk. They're the one that are updating this piece that wraps around there, and then in the middle are these. So you're bringing both sides or both ends of the organization together, from that leadership and compliance and risk to the departments. But the departments are focusing here. I can always add these and wrap it around. So at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Bob.
Wonderful. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
If you do have any questions for Chris here today, again, you can find that question panel on the right-hand side of your screen. First question here, does this lizard brain pass with auditors?
Oh, wow, what a great question. Thanks, Bob. So the answer is yes. This approach and methodology has been fine-tuned over the last 3 years, and we've actually gotten compliments from the auditors on how well they're laid out. And that would be specifically Like I have direct examples with the OCC and the Federal Reserve Bank, which again with FFIC, that's usually the most rigorous. Great question.
All right, the next question's pretty long here. So basically, it's our most significant challenge pertains to recovery task management and tracking during both planned and unplanned DR events. We currently use Microsoft Project. Our DR plan contains over 10,000 tasks for recovering our in-scope data center, which has 10,000 plus servers. Question: any recommendations for tools or products for managing or tracking tasks?
Wow. So that's a big one. Let me take it a bit at a time. So recommendation right away is when you look at recovery, forget the department. So IT as a whole, you're not building IT. I would recommend breaking it down into a library. So for example, it doesn't matter that a server name to start with, a physical server or a virtual server, I'm going to start. I'm going to get that done. Then I'm going to have an application recovery plan because it's going to be role based. What is my role? I'm a network engineer. I handle the Cisco switches. I'm going to have my plan. So first is to diagram that out. So what you're doing immediately is dissecting those 10,000 into manageable pieces by role. From a compliance standpoint, you can roll it up. So project, again, this is a personal bias. It's great for doing a quick and dirty Gantt chart, but it usually takes longer to put it in project than it does to actually use. And it makes it even harder. So yes, there are tools out there. We have one. They're out there, and they're designed to track in the event of a test with a clock going in the background of exactly what has been done in what time frame. So Bob, you got that question. I know it's long. I think I hit most of them. Could you let me know if any one of those I missed?
I think it's probably good enough, and you'll have access to the question to follow up with them directly after the webinar's ended too. So if we missed part of it. So next question: any suggestions on how to get our team to buy into or even educate on this lizard brain idea?
Sure. Oh, that's great. What I usually do from a team perspective is, and I'll follow up. I have a slide that I use for kickoffs of how long it takes to build a lizard brain plan. And here's the bottom line. If you're a critical department, it's 4 1-hour meetings. And then an hour a year to update your plans, whether that be Excel or a tool. So again, I'll follow up with that one afterwards as well. But that is very common.
All right, next question. How often do you suggest reviewing and updating your plans?
Great. I always recommend, and I think that falls in line with some of the regulations and standards, is once or twice a year. If you make it twice a year, you break it down. So what I normally say is, hey, go look at what you got for your list of ingredients. Now, if they've got their steps right there, they usually do that as well. And then at the end of the year is, hey, go review your steps. So you break it down into successful bite-sized chunks. So that's usually what is a good recommendation. Twice a year, broken down into component parts, and then a BIA every 12 to 18 months.
All right. Our biggest challenge is our budget and investment on a new tool to automate our processes. Any suggestions on how to secure budgeting?
Again, I could take that one offline, but if you look at the total cost from a business department of how long you're spending with the business, what does it cost the organization per hour and your team versus an automation, which is usually a factor of 5 to 10, believe it or not. Usually plays an effect. But yeah, I actually have a very detailed spreadsheet that I use for this question, so it's very common. Excellent.
All right. What is your preferred method to exercise the lizard brain plan?
That's not a fair question because we actually have a Resilience One that we use. But we have some clients that'll use their Excel to do that. And that's usually done in a tabletop where you're going to facilitate it with their plans in front of them. And I'll leave you with this. We always tell them it's okay to fail. This is a learning experience. It's going to be a refinement. That's why we do it every year. And then refresh it as well.
Wonderful. There's a few other questions that are a little product related and best handled offline. So Chris will follow up with everyone that we did not get to the questions here today. Any parting words here today, Chris?
Well, first of all, thanks for attending. Great turnout. This is doable, and the great thing that we see is it really engages the business. They take the ownership of it and they become excited. And when you think about when's the last time you brought excitement in, it makes it fun as well. So very easily doable. Thank you, Bob.
Wonderful. Thanks again, everyone, for their attendance here today. We again hope you gather some great information from today's webinar. DRJ would also like to thank Chris for his time here today, as well as Strategic BCP for sponsoring today's webinar. We will be emailing everyone a link to the recording of this webinar. This email will be coming directly from Strategic BCP, so look for it in your inboxes here in the next few days. If you have any additional questions, please contact Disaster Recovery Journal. Thanks again, and this now ends today's webinar.
Thank you, Bob.